A Step to the Left by The Distortion. Chapter 3. The air was whistling past his ears as he pedaled the bike. He could feel his lungs and legs burning. A short, hysterical laugh made its way out of his throat. He was alive. His lungs worked like they hadn't in years. It didn't take long to find the library. It was right where he remembered it being. He wasn't sure if that was a surprise or not. It was a large red brick building next to the elementary school. He remembered picking Evan and Elizabeth up from there after the school day got out. The memory pulled at his heart and he shoved it away. He needed to focus and figure out where everything went wrong. Why were things different here? When Michael walked into the library, he was met with a bright-faced woman with pink hair. "Hello," she called out to him. "What can I do for you today?" "Do you, He paused, clearing his throat when it came out hoarse. "Do you keep newspapers here?" "Depends on what you're looking for," she answered with a smile. "We have the local newspaper on microfilm." "Yes," Michael said. "That would be perfect. Thank you." The woman introduced herself as Harriet before starting on a long-winded spiel about microfilm. Michael let her. As long as she wasn't asking him too many questions, it wasn't a problem. "All right, here we are. What years were you looking for?" Michael froze. This was a topic he'd been avoiding. He looked young, so they probably hadn't hit the 2000s yet, but he didn't actually know what year it was. He remembered what the girl in the house had said about being 10 years too late, and latched onto that. "Can I just get all the papers from 10 years ago?" The librarian smiled, quickly heading out of the room to grab the film. When she came back, she instructed Michael on how to use the machine and left him alone. 10 years ago was 1985. That put him in 1995. His father, if luck would let him have this one thing, should be dead. Of course, by all accounts, Henry should be alive, so there was no certainty of that fact. Michael pushed that dizzying thought aside and started his search. Going through it day by day, he checked each headline and obituary. There were a few small mentions of Freddy's, but the first thing that really caught his attention were the articles about the missing children. They accumulate over the first few months, he reads, 6 in total. He reads the name to himself, dread settling in his stomach. Fritz, Jeremy, Susie, Cassidy, Michael? He stared back at the name. That couldn't be right? There was no Michael who died. At least, not until he had gotten scooped, and that line was a bit blurry anyway. He shook the thought from his head, scrubbing his hands over his face. He needed to focus on the important information, the bigger picture. William was no better here. These children had still been murdered. Even if they were listed as missing, even if they were only ever officially labeled as kidnapped, Michael knew better. He knew they were dead, stuffed in those suits to rot for the past 10 years. One headline announced the closing of Freddy's. "Local pizzeria closing following tragedy," it read. Attached to the article was a picture of the restaurant during the investigation. Michael froze as he investigated the photo. This place was his own personal hell, he was certain. Standing there, near the edge of the photo, was his father, talking to a tall, thin man with light hair. It hit harder than Michael was expecting, and he gave himself a minute just to sit there, doing nothing but staring at his father's face. This was going to be harder than he thought. Some small part of him really did hope that William was already in that cursed suit, that he wouldn't have to see that stupid face. Springtrap might be harder to kill, sure, but it was better than going toe-to-toe with the perfectly alive version of his father. It might actually kill him to stare into those fucking eyes, cold and calculating, for a second longer than he had to. Even with that thought in the back of his mind, he knew he had to do it all over again. He had to find Freddy's and burn that place to the ground. He couldn't leave those children there. He couldn't fail them again, leaving Henry to pick up the pieces. Henry was dead. Michael had to do this alone. Taking a deep breath in, he continued looking. Finally, in the July papers, he found the obituary. The smiling face of Henry Emily stared back at him. He was looking up at one of his animatronics. He had died at home, but the piece lacked any real substance. He was going to have to talk to others if he wanted more than that. Not that there was anyone to ask. Michael had even fewer connections here than he did in his past life. It was honestly an impressive feat. He stared at the picture of Henry for a while. It must have been taken before Charlie's death. He didn't look as sad as Michael remembered. The suit looked old too. Michael could barely see some spring locks at the edge of the photo. He felt a little nauseous at the idea that this could be either of the Fredbear Diner suits. Spring Bonnie and Fredbear didn't hold a particularly warm place in his mind. The later months didn't give him much information until he came across an article from December. It announced that Freddy's was being built over. Was he too late? Were the children in some scrapyard never to be seen again? William was too sentimental to let that slide, right? He'd set up payment for the other Freddys in his timeline, with some sort of fucked up trophy for him. Michael shuddered. He began to pack up his things and return the microfilm to Harriet. He should head out before it got too dark. Thankfully, despite his worries about the differences in this strange world, physical landmarks remained mostly the same. It was no longer a surprise to him when he went up the road to Freddy's and rolled into a familiar lot. His excitement turned into confusion when he noticed what exactly the building attached looked like, however. Michael felt his heart drop. Had they actually gone through with the mall? It was hard to really see in the dark, but the building was far too large to be Freddy's. Michael pulled out a small flashlight he bought at the gas station in town. It was a dual thing, and Michael had to stay close to the building for it to have any effect. He passed by 2 cars in the parking lot with a frown. He would have to be careful of people. He scanned the perimeter for a while, making a note of entrance and exits to the place. Michael turned his light off quickly when he heard voices coming around the corner he was at. Then, a light began to draw near. He sank back into the woods near him, listening intently. "Sorry, guys. I hope there'll at least be something familiar," a male voice said as he turned the corner, and Michael pushed himself fully behind a tree. He hadn't expected how many people there would be. He wondered what they were looking for, or even if, somehow, they were just normal teenagers looking for some type of trouble. "Yeah," Michael heard a familiar voice say. It was the girl from Henry's house. That caught his attention. They walked quietly for a second, and Michael willed the group to start talking again so he could sneak closer undetected. For once, his wishes came true. Do we want to try going inside?" another girl asked. There was a brief murmur of overlapping voices, and Michael took his chance. He inched forward, stopping when he was a bit ahead of the group. They slowed down, and Michael wondered if he had been caught, but they all looked toward the first brown-haired girl. "What do you think?" the second girl asked. When she didn't answer, the other boy, a dark-haired one, called her name. "Charlie?" Michael froze, not even breathing as he mulled over what he had just heard. The girl he saw at Henry's house, at the Emily's house, was named Charlie. That couldn't be a coincidence, right? That girl was Charlie Emily. That didn't make any sense. She should be dead. She was killed by his father soon after the death of Evan. Although Henry was supposed to be alive, so nothing really made much sense here. She was supposed to help the spirits. What became of them if there was no Charlie? No puppet to lift them into her arms? "Charlie?" the man asked again, and she looked up at him. "Sorry," Charlie said. "What were you saying, Jessica?" This could not be happening to him right now. He did not have the time or mental stability for this information. "Do you want to go inside?" Jessica asked. "Why not?" she said with a breathy tone. "Anyone else want to turn?" She waved the flashlight around. Michael ducked further behind his tree. "Why is it so heavy?" one of the boys asked. Michael assumed the flashlight had been handed off to him. "Here you go." "It's a police flashlight," Charlie said. "You can hit people with it." "Your aunt really wasn't kidding around, huh? Ever used it?" "Not yet." Michael heard one set of footsteps move forward, then the rest. They peered out the doors. He knew they would have no chance of getting in through there, where large hammered metal doors marked the actual entrance. The group talked amongst themselves as they looked around, and Michael saw Charlie point up at one of the windows, calling out to someone named John. Next to it was a large pile of gravel. It's like they didn't even care if someone got in. "Not trying to keep people out," one of the boys, John apparently, said. "What's anyone going to steal?" Charlie asked. Michael watched as they made their way up the mound. He was certain, at multiple points, that at least one of them was going to fall. The boy he didn't know the name of reached the window first and peered through. Jessica looked over his shoulder. "Can we drop down?" John asked. Yes, the unknown boy replied quickly. No, Jessica said at the same time. I'll go, Charlie volunteered. Michael watched as Charlie, who didn't even look into the building, put her feet in through the window. Jessica protested. I'll be fine, Charlie reassured her. Without a second glance, Charlie and Emily dropped through the window and disappeared from his view. I feel it's obvious I don't cuss a lot because of how much vigor I put into cuss words like the F-bomb, but it feels like there's no other way to say it. Also, I would like to apologize to Harriet because I gave her one heck of an annoying voice. And oh my, there was a lot of switching voices in this chapter. Hopefully they sound semi-consistent for each character, for listening sakes. I do have to say each chapter I read gets more and more fun to voice. And longest chapter so far. Michael has gathered more information on the world he's now in, and has met or eavesdropped, or more like stalked, Charlie and the crew that are present for the first night. I know there are more friends yet to be introduced, and man am I going to vex over how to make these voices sound distinct. That being said, I'll see you next chapter.